So good day to everyone, and welcome to our Dharma time together. And so for this Sunday morning meditation, I'd like to use an analogy, a little bit of a rough analogy, is that if you put black duct tape around a light bulb and then turn on the light bulb, there might be no light coming into the room. If you take a little pinhole, make a little pinhole in the duct tape, you get little stream of light going out in one direction. But if you begin peeling away the light, the tape, you get more and more the light going more and more wider kind of directions. If you take the duct tape off entirely, then you have the light shines out in kind of like 360 degrees all the way around. So if our awareness, our capacity to know and be present, is a little bit like the light, we turn on our capacity to see, turn on the light, the capacity to be aware. But we have something that we're caught up in and preoccupied with. It's like we have the light can't shine or can't be open fully in all directions. And if we're completely lost in fantasy or lost in distracted thought, it's almost as if there's, the duct tape is completely surrounding the light, and the light is only there for itself. It's self-absorbed in a certain way, and all the light's bouncing on inside the bulb. But as we meditate, we learn, we appreciate how limited it is to be caught up in preoccupations and thoughts. Even if those thoughts are grand in nature and have phenomenal, wonderful fantasies of traveling around the world, everywhere, it's still ingrown, inward directed. As we begin to let go of our thoughts and let go of our preoccupations, there is slowly and steadily an opening up of the light, opening up of our vision, our capacity to see. And at some point, it really becomes really clear the difference between having it be wide open, all the duct tape off, and when we start covering it again. And that movement of, now it's gotten narrow, it's gotten contracted, it's become even self-absorbed. That doesn't feel so good. It felt really nice to have the awareness uncontracted, unlimited. We might still focus on a particular thing, like the breathing, but we do so without there being a tightening, a narrowing. There's more like, rather than the attention going really focused in a tight way, it gets really focused in an open way, kind of like the open palm of the hand. One of the most sensitive parts of the hand is right here at the center of it. If we kind of get focused this way, tight and focused, we don't avail ourselves of the most sensitive part. But if we're really relaxed and open, then the sensitive part meets our experience, our breathing. And then, so this is an effort to use analogies to emphasize the sensitivity, the care to letting our awareness be open, be wide, be relaxed, be uncontracted, untight, unlimited, unlimited in a sense by the restrictions we put on it, by our desires, our clingings, and aversions that get hyper-focused. And so if that made sense to you, then we can practice that. And if it doesn't make so much sense, you don't have to worry about it too much or at all. So assuming a meditation posture that is relaxed and open, with the chest maybe a little open, gently closing the eyes, and taking a few long, slow, deep breaths. And as you exhale, maybe there can be a relaxation that kind of, the kind of maybe relaxation that a flower does when it opens its petals, from being a tight bud to being an open flower. So to relax in the exhale and let things open up. On the exhale, relaxing the belly, relaxing the chest. Softening the shoulders. Softening the face. Breathing normally. And imagine that you're turning on the light of awareness so that it shines 360 degrees in all directions. And then at the center of that is a sensitive spot that's there to meet the experience of the body breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. Being intimate with breathing, but without contracting or getting tight with awareness, without the mind bearing down or tightening up. And this kind of intimate sensitivity is often associated with being receptive. Open, receptive to all things, but with the center of it all, center of awareness, receiving, breathing in and breathing out. And perhaps as you get caught up in thoughts or fantasies, you can feel how you lose that openness, that maybe lose a spaciousness or lose a receptivity. And without being critical of that, relax and receive again, open again. Breathing in and breathing out. Are you absorbed in thought so the light of awareness is obscured? What is it like to let go of your thoughts so that the light of awareness is on 360 degrees, very open, present, with its sensitive center centered on the breathing. And then as we come to the end of this sitting, perhaps to consider how as we become more aware, more present, more open to our experience, there is a place within of sensitivity, heightened awareness, sometimes associated with a tenderness, a place that is receptive and that to meet the world with this receptivity, this tenderness, this sensitivity. This is a way that we evoke the sentiments of care, caregiving, respect, goodwill for others. And to end the sitting with some orientation to look upon others, be ready to be present with others from a place of receptivity, care, tenderness that inspires or reminds us of our capacity to love others, to be friendly, kind, compassionate. And may it be that through this meditation practice, that we are giving more and more, developing more and more capacity to gaze upon the world kindly, to become a friend of the world, a friend of others. And in our friendship with all beings, may we wish for the happiness of others, for their safety and their health, for their peace and their freedom. And with our friendly disposition, may each of us in our own way and appropriate for each of us contribute to the welfare and happiness of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. May all beings everywhere have their hearts settled and at peace. So, good day, everyone. And as an announcement for before the talk, um, we're getting to the point where IMC is seriously considering opening for our doors here, our physical doors, so people can come here together and meditate and engage in the Dharma. And we were planning to open in a week from today, on August 1st. So I think it's prudent for us to delay that opening and continue online the way we have. Um, the and the and part of the reason for that is that this Delta variant that is spreading, and we don't quite understand the implications of it and the impact it has. That the degree to which even people who maybe have been vaccinated can be asymptomatic carriers of it, and what it means for us to come together here in somewhat close confines. And as it's still kind of growing, the Delta variant, and the cases are growing here in our county here in California, I think that the prudent thing to do is to wait. And ideally we would wait, and I think until uh, the local county health department rescinds the request that people who, even vaccinated people, when they come together indoors, that they would wear masks. So I don't know if that's the standard we want to keep, but at least for now, that's the request. And with the Delta variant, I think it's just better to wait. And so I think we'll just keep it open, or in undefined when we'll open, and probably we'll have at least a week's notice that we can announce it here and our other online um, um, offerings. And also we'll update the calendar. We'll update also on the IMC website about what's happening. So hopefully, to keep track of these things, you'll know. Those of you who are interested in coming locally and being here in person. So, we've gone through, many of us, all of us, I guess, many, many months now of this pandemic of COVID-19 era. And when it first started here and we went into shelter in place in California back in March or April, I gave a talk about this being a time for kind of, the shelter in place was kind of like a retreat, and that many of the dynamics and that the patterns that happen on retreat would probably unfold for people on this enforced retreat of the shelter in place. And now we're coming to a different phase of it. It's not clear exactly what phase. It's premature to say that we're completely open again and it's over, here in California at least. In parts of the country and definitely parts of the world, it's raging and surging, and tremendous suffering that's continuing with this virus. And but to have some reflection, what are the lessons from this? How do we grow and develop under the impact of this powerful event that's happening to us all? And so that's a little bit inspires this talk today. And I want to, before I specify what the theme is, I want to say that one of the first things that really impressed me about the circumstance of the beginning of the pandemic, beginning of shelter in place, is that the same behavior, looking from the outside, can look exactly the same. Could be behavior which the main motivation is for individuals to protect themselves. And the same behavior looks exactly the same would be to behave in such a way as to protect others. So what I mean by that is that we're all, subject to being maybe getting sick from the virus. And so we might want to stay away from people who have the virus. We want to shelter in place. We might want to live apart. And that's what many of us have done now for many months. And many people, somewhat isolated existences for this time. And so it can be motivated by protecting oneself. However, all of us are capable of being a vector for it, a transmitter of the illness. We know that people can have the virus and be asymptomatic. They have no idea that they're carrying it, and they're just walking transmitters. And so one way to protect our neighbors, our friends, our family, and others is to not walk into public, not walk into their situation, not go to a wedding, not go to visit grandchildren or visit grandparents, or not to go into places where we might be a transmitter. So both behaviors look exactly the same. And what struck me at the beginning of the pandemic is that if we are motivated by care for others, rather than only protecting ourselves, that I think that caring for others is really good for the heart. It's really a wonderful kind of medicine and support. There's a kind of a radiance or goodness that comes from that. And of course, protecting ourselves is not wrong. And some people have a higher need to do that than others for many different reasons, and that needs to be the focus. But even there, it's possible to both protect oneself and at the same time do it for the sake of protecting others. And so this idea of being able to do both, we don't have to choose one or the other. And that's kind of the theme of what I like to say here, is that the Buddhist practice is a practice that I'm hoping, I very much staked my career and practice and teaching on this, that as we develop in the practice, that it becomes a natural thing to want to care for others, or to be friendly, or to be supportive, or live in the world in a world of suffering in a compassionate way. And not to do it in a way that is oppressive, not to do it in a way that is stressful, but really from the abundance of the heart, from a sense of the peacefulness, the openness, the heightened kind of 360-degree radiance of awareness and the heart of compassion that meets the world with our sensitivity and responds to it in some way. And that this is an integral part of Buddhist practice, is this growing to become someone who will, in one way or the other, particular for each person, how it's done, live for the welfare and happiness of others. And for some people, it's caring for their family. That's what, for some people, it's caring for family and neighbors. For some people, it's offering whatever they have to offer that brings joy and happiness to the world. Some people, it's to be actively involved in service roles where we're helping others and involved with others. And some people are activists and involved in social action, and some people humanitarian efforts. There's all this whole range of things that people will choose. A lot depends on their karma and their disposition and their circumstance. What's the right way? But it's all ways of somehow having a heart that cares for the world. So when the Buddha, after the Buddha was first awakened, and soon thereafter, he set forth out into the world to teach what he had learned. And after some period, he had gathered around him 60 people, 60, who had been transformed by his teachings and the practice he's taught, and they became fully enlightened, fully liberated. And at that point he told them, and this is a quote, this is a passage that's quoted often, it's kind of beautiful. He instructed them he gave them the final instruction. It's kind of like after all the instructions and all the practice, they all end up here as the final instruction. And that is to go forth for the welfare of the world, welfare of the beings, the people of the world. Go forth for the happiness of this world of beings. Go forth out of care for this world of beings and people. No two of you go in the same direction, spread out, and live and practice and teach for the welfare and happiness of all people and all gods. The word gods here, it's possible it means, sometimes the word deva means kings. So go forth for the welfare of all beings, all humans, ordinary humans and those who are in ruling position, who sometimes need greater remedial support for learning how to be free and really understand what freedom from suffering really is. And so I love this little passage that the instructions are to go forth for the welfare and happiness of the world. That's kind of like, it's like the North Star of what Buddhist practice is aiming towards. This is the final instructions. And then if we go to a whole different set of teachings, which is also emphasizes this care for others and care for oneself. And this is the Buddha's teachings to his son. So he had a son who spent much of his growing up under the guidance of his father. They think about from the age 7 onwards. And at some point, the Buddha gave him this instructions that could be seen. Some people say, well, this is kind of a child-appropriate kind of teaching. But because it's so simple and so to the heart of the matter, it's maybe easier to understand. And all the rest of Buddhism can be seen as an expansion of this particular teaching. It seems the way the story is told, that his young son, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, was caught telling a lie. And so the Buddha addresses him about this and says, that if someone on the spiritual path tells a lie, it kind of undermines the value of their practice, can really empties the kind of reservoirs of goodness or Dharma inside of a person that really would allow a person to grow and develop. So he kind of little bit strong language like this, like that there's not really, that someone who's on the path should never lie. And after he does that, he says this. He says, what's the purpose of a mirror? And his son says, the purpose of a mirror is for reflection, to see yourself in the mirror. And the Buddha said, in the same way, the Dharma is like a mirror. The purpose is to see yourself and to reflect yourself more clearly. And this is how you do it. Before you say something, before you do something, and before you intentionally think about something, you should reflect. You should look at that. Take a good look at yourself with these criteria. Is what I'm about to say, will it cause affliction? Will it cause harm to yourself, to others, or to both self and others? If you say it, if you do it, or even if you think it, will it cause harm? And if it does, don't do it. If it doesn't cause harm, if it's for the benefit of others, then please go ahead and do it. While you're doing something or saying something, or even while you're reflecting and thinking about something, also use that Dharma mirror. Look at yourself and ask yourself the question, as I'm doing this, is it for my own harm, for the harm of others, or for the harm of both self and others? And if it's harmful, stop doing it. If it's not harmful, if it's for the benefit of others and self, then keep doing it. And then he says, after you've done something, after you've said something, after you've finished some action that you've done, after you've spent some time thinking about someone or something, you should also use a Dharma mirror to live this reflective life, questioning yourself, looking at yourself, considering the impact, the consequences of your behavior. And did it cause harm to yourself? Did it cause harm to others? Did it cause harm to self and others? If it did, then go find someone that you respect a lot. The ancient language is a wise person. Find a wise person and let them know. There's the alchemy, the chemistry of the inner life is such that if you've caused harm, and usually, like, not exactly a confession, but just kind of make it acknowledged in the presence of something else, it changes some inner relationship to it all. It's easier for you to kind of not succumb to the same thing again. It's more likely to be, if you're accountable in some healthy way, and you're not public to everyone, but you share it with someone else, then you're a little bit more accountable to that person, to yourself. It's a little bit more like a fuller recognition that creates the conditions that you're more likely to be careful in the future. So the Buddha said, go tell someone. And then, but if it's after you've done something, and it's has not been harmful to anyone, for self or others, has been beneficial, then just go about your business happily. That's great. So what we find here if teaching his son when his son was just a kid is kind of like the most beginning level of Dharma practice, Dharma teaching. That here also we find a concern, emphasis on the concern of being careful for the welfare of others, to not cause harm in the world to anyone, including oneself. And it wasn't only about not harming oneself, only doing things beneficial for oneself. It's equal concern for self, for others, and then this third category, self and others, which I understand that includes kind of we as a community, we as a group, as a dynamic of people who work together, the relationship between us. And so we see here in these two examples how integral it is to the teachings of the Buddha, the concern for the welfare of others and well-being of others, and the concern with not causing harm to others and to ourselves. And that all along, from between the beginning instructions to the final instructions to go forth for the welfare of others, we see over and over again that we come back to this idea that the Dharma Dharma practice, maturing in the Dharma, has a lot to do with how we care for others as well. And with the example that I was inspired by at the beginning of the pandemic, perhaps also we begin discovering a way of having this care and sensitivity and carefulness for the welfare of others and not cause harm, that doesn't feel punitive, that doesn't feel constricting, it doesn't feel limiting, but actually is opposite. That as we go forward, that and consider others, that we're doing so from this openness, this inclusiveness, this unconstricted place, unlimited place, our concerns are not narrowed and tight, but our concerns come out of an openness and a wideness and a receptivity all the way around. And there's a way in which when we're excessively concerned with ourselves, our own well-being, our own protecting ourselves or benefiting ourselves. As I said earlier, sometimes that's a completely appropriate and necessary and should be appreciated as such. But human beings also have a tremendous capacity for being selfish, for having conceit. And when that happens, then this self-concern feels like a narrowing, a tightening, a shutting down. And this is one of the great advantages of meditation, is we can have a experiential, a felt sense experience of what it feels like to start closing down, constricting, tightening the tension and the stress of selfishness, the tension and stress of conceit, of excessive self-preoccupation. And a felt sense experience that when we open up, there's a way of caring for the world that is absence of stress, absence of a kind of tension, that has a kind of a rightness to it, a nourishing to it, a freedom to it, even if what we're encountering in the world, the suffering in the world, is quite uncomfortable. And this kind of the goodness of this, the support of that. And so I think that kind of inherent in the Dharma practice is a learning, perhaps a slow learning, of the disadvantages of shutting down, closing down, or having this very strong division, divisiveness, boundaries between self and others, that is actually kind of harmful to oneself. And it leads to easy ways of harming others. Those begin to dissolve, begin to soften, to open. And it isn't that the boundaries completely dissolve exactly between self and other. That distinction doesn't completely disappear, but it becomes one that there's a sensitivity and an openness and intimacy without this strong reference to me, myself, and I here. And openness, relaxation, freedom. And and then one more teachings of the Buddha around this. It's I think, a very important topic to think carefully about. And that is that the Buddha gave this teachings about 4 different ways in which people might orient themselves towards others or to benefiting others. The first one is to have no interest in the welfare of either oneself or others. The second is to be interested in the welfare and happiness of others, but not oneself. The third is to be concerned for the welfare and happiness of oneself, but not be involved in benefiting others. And the fourth is to be concerned for the welfare and happiness of oneself, of others, and of the whole world. And then he goes on to say that the last of these is the foremost, is the best. And that he says it's kind of like if you take milk and it gets in the it gets curdled into curds, and then from the curds you can make ghee, and from ghee apparently you can get the cream of the ghee, like the best parts of the ghee if you separate it maybe or something. And at least in the translation that I have says that then finally you get to the cream of the ghee. And the last category, the person is concerned for both self and the whole world. That's kind of the equivalent of the cream of the ghee kind of person, the foremost person. But what's interesting is that there's a hierarchy here between these, and where caring only for others or caring only for ourselves fits into these categories is fascinating, I think, because the second best is to care for oneself without caring for others. Third best is caring for others but not oneself. And this, I think, is a little bit jarring. It was a little bit jarring for me when I first saw it. For some people it's jarring because sometimes there's a message that we should really care about others first before ourselves. We shouldn't be selfish. And caring for others is really the highest kind of virtue we can have. But I think in the Buddhist analysis, that if we care for others before we have developed ourselves, developed our own capacity and understanding of liberation, of freedom, before we've kind of freed ourselves of some of our uh, capacity for attachments, for clinging, for hostility and irritation and cynicism and resentment, and that then it's all too easy to cause harm when we're involved in supporting other people. But if we practice for our own benefit first, then we learn at some point what the highest benefit is. We learn what the human capacity is for real, deep, thoroughgoing, fully embodied, heartfelt well-being and peace and happiness. That's what the Dharma is moving towards. And then when we want to support and help others, we have a reference point of how deeply and fully this is possible for people, that we can point to that, or we can support that, or we have a North Star of what we're trying to do for them. Um, and so, but the best of it all is if we live our lives caring for ourselves, caring for others, and caring for the whole world. And so here we see three different examples of the Buddha's teachings where caring for the world is integral to it. And the one I told first about sending people off to fully mature people to care for the world, there's the idea is that when you're fully liberated, you've experiencing for yourself the best possible way of living in this world, the greatest happiness, the greatest peace. So there's no need to kind of focus on oneself in the same way anymore to attain that what's been attained. And then what's next is to care for others. So whether one is beginning in practice or in the middle of practice or at the end of the whole cycle of practice, that in the Buddha's teachings at least, that this inclusion of the well-being of others is important. And in the first beginning teachings to his son, a tremendous care about the consequences of our actions. What's the impact that our lives, how we live, has on the world around us? And one of the things that the coronavirus teaches us is that that impact might be invisible to us. How we buy consumer goods, we don't see the impact of on the people who mine the resources. We don't see the impact on the countries and the peoples who made it in sweat houses or in factories. We don't see the impact in pollution and on the environment and the communities that are impacted by that. And so to be concerned about the impact, the consequence of our actions on others can also start to involve a care and sensitivity to the unseen ways that we impact the world. Because it would be nice if we could live in the world without any harm caused to this world, both seen and unseen, known and unknown. What a great thing it would be. And what a great thing it is to meet people and know there are people in this world who are living with this kind of care and this kind of sensitivity because they're free, because they matured and developed and they know how to do this in a way that nourishes the best in our hearts. So as we come to the end, we've come to this phase of the pandemic, I think it's a wonderful time to reflect a little bit about how beneficial it is for self and for others to include in our practice the welfare and happiness of others as well. So, thank you very much.